Jack's truck was gone, towed from the only place he trusted after a grueling therapy session. A disabled veteran stripped of his lifeline in an instant, staring at empty asphalt where hope once stood. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Jack stood frozen on the cracked asphalt, the hot summer sun beating down, sweat gathering at his temples as the words from Officer Collins hit him like a punch to the gut. "No exceptions," the officer said again, voice clipped, eyes scanning Jack with an impersonal sharpness that felt colder than the early spring breeze that usually brought him comfort. Jack's hands clenched into fists, knuckles white. This wasn't just about the truck. This was about respect, about honor, about the invisible scars he carried every day beneath his worn jacket. He thought back to his time in the Marines, the long deployments, the nights spent in foreign lands, the firefights, and the silent prayers whispered under starlit skies. Each mission, each sacrifice etched into his soul. The Silverado was more than just metal and wheels. It was a symbol of survival, a fragile bridge to a life he fought to reclaim. Now, here he was, stripped of it in a place that belonged to the very government he had pledged to protect. Jack's mind raced with a storm of questions. Why no warning signs? Why no notice? If this was strict security, why wasn't there an ounce of humanity in the process? His thoughts spiraled into bitter frustration. His medical appointments, the therapy sessions meant to keep his PTSD from swallowing him whole. How was he supposed to get there now? The system that promised to support veterans was failing him in the most basic way. Officer Collins remained rigid, professional, almost robotic. "I understand it's difficult, sir, but the rules are clear. The Pentagon does not allow civilian vehicles on its property. We have to maintain security." The words felt rehearsed, like a mantra repeated without thought for the person standing before him. Jack's voice cracked as he spoke up. "I'm a veteran. I'm disabled. This truck is my lifeline. There's no place else to park near the clinic." But the officer simply shook his head and motioned toward a phone number for the impound lot. Jack's throat tightened, a familiar sting settling behind his eyes. Anger churned in his chest, hot and relentless. But beneath it was a deeper, rawer pain, the crushing loneliness of feeling invisible despite years of service. The war had taken much from him: friends, limbs, peace of mind, and now this simple act of towing his truck felt like a final blow to his dignity. As he walked away, the gravel crunching underfoot, Jack's mind clung to the injustice. This was more than an accident or oversight. It was a betrayal by a system he'd given everything to uphold. The irony burned. The place that should have stood as a fortress of support was now a cold, unyielding wall. No compassion, no recognition, just rules, and the echo of a veteran's silent plea unheard. In that moment, Jack realized this fight wasn't just against an impound lot or a parking violation. It was a battle against the neglect faced by countless veterans who felt abandoned, discarded by the very nation they once protected. And though his hands trembled with fatigue and fury, something within him sparked, a simmering determination that this would not be the end of his story. Jack sat at his cluttered kitchen table, the late afternoon light filtering weakly through the threadbare curtains, casting long shadows over stacks of paperwork and a half-empty coffee mug. Each form bore the weight of bureaucracy: VA disability claims, proof of service, letters from his doctors, all meticulously organized by his daughter, Emily, who had insisted he prepare every document with painstaking care. The effort to fight back was exhausting, but Jack's mind burned with a clarity he hadn't felt since his final deployment overseas. The sting of being dismissed and disregarded by the very system meant to support him hadn't faded, but it had transformed into a simmering resolve. He wasn't merely trying to get his truck back. He was fighting for recognition, for respect, for the basic dignity owed to every veteran forced to navigate a labyrinth of red tape and indifference. Emily's voice echoed in his memory, firm and unwavering. reminding him that silence only ensured the status quo. "Dad, they can't ignore us if you make them listen," she'd said, her eyes fierce with conviction. Jack knew she was right. He drafted a message on his old smartphone, simple, honest, and raw. He described the shock of returning from therapy to find his truck gone, the helplessness when Officer Collins cited strict security regulations, and the cold dismissal that cut deeper than any wound he carried from the war. He posted the story to social media, tagging veterans organizations, advocacy groups, even local news outlets. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Comments flooded in, voices of veterans who'd faced similar injustices, families who empathized with his pain, strangers angered by the callousness of an institution they trusted. The digital outcry rippled far beyond his expectations. Hashtags formed, community pages rallied support, and soon Jack's story wasn't just a complaint, it was a symbol. A symbol of all the men and women who had donned the uniform, only to be met with bureaucratic stonewalls when they returned home. Messages of encouragement filled his inbox, each one a small thread weaving a larger tapestry of shared struggle and resilience. Then, unexpectedly, the call came. A Pentagon official requested a meeting, a rare gesture in a place notorious for silence and deflection. Jack felt a flicker of cautious optimism. Maybe this was the moment when the system would bend just enough to acknowledge the human cost behind its cold protocols. At the meeting, the atmosphere was tense but respectful. Officer Collins, the man who had towed Jack's truck, was there too. Behind the uniformed stoicism, Jack saw something he hadn't expected. Hesitation, even regret. Collins spoke quietly, admitting that while he had followed orders without question, he understood the weight of Jack's sacrifice. Bound by duty, yes, but conflicted, undeniably. That admission struck a chord deep inside Jack. It reminded him that even within rigid structures, there were cracks where empathy could seep through. It was not just a battle of rules and regulations, but of human hearts grappling with their own constraints. As the meeting concluded, Jack's hope solidified. This fight, this relentless push against an uncaring system, was about more than a truck or a parking spot. It was about reclaiming a voice stolen by silence, about demanding that every veteran be seen, heard, and honored not only for their past service, but for their present humanity. Walking out of the Pentagon that day, Jack's steps felt lighter, not because the struggle was over, but because he was no longer fighting alone. The fire inside him burned brighter, fueled by the collective will of a community refusing to be ignored. In that moment, hope wasn't just a fragile dream. It was a tangible force driving him forward, ready to carve a path toward change. The announcement came quietly at first, a formal statement buried deep within Pentagon communications, acknowledging a failure to properly mark the parking lot as restricted government property. It was a small concession on paper, but for Jack Reynolds, it was a monumental breakthrough. The Pentagon not only agreed to reimburse every cent of his towing and storage fees, but committed to a series of tangible reforms. Clear, unmistakable signage would be installed, and personnel would receive comprehensive training to identify and accommodate vehicles belonging to disabled veterans. The changes were a direct result of the public outcry that Jack's story had ignited, but more importantly, they represented a rare moment of accountability in a system often criticized for its cold indifference. Officer Collins reached out personally, an unexpected gesture that unsettled Jack more than it comforted him at first. When they met in a quiet cafe away from the glare of the media, Collins's uniform was replaced by a simple jacket, and his posture carried the weight of the internal conflict he had wrestled with for weeks. His voice was low, almost hesitant, as he expressed regret for the role he had played. "I was just doing my job," he said, "but that doesn't mean I didn't see the man behind the truck. I want to do better. I'm going to push for changes inside to make sure no one else has to go through what you did." Jack studied the man in front of him, no longer the rigid enforcer of rules, but a human being caught in the friction between duty and compassion. There was honesty there, a rawness that mirrored Jack's own struggle. Accepting Collins's apology wasn't a surrender. It was an acknowledgement that real change often begins with understanding, not bitterness. It was a fragile but necessary bridge, and Jack crossed it with a quiet grace. News of the Pentagon's concessions spread quickly, carried on the wings of social media and amplified by veteran advocacy groups. What began as Jack's personal fight became a national campaign, a clarion call to reform policies governing veterans' access and treatment on government properties. Support poured in from every corner: lawmakers, activists, ordinary citizens, each rallying behind the idea that those who sacrificed for their country deserved more than bureaucratic neglect. The campaign's momentum swelled into legislation proposals aimed at safeguarding veterans' rights, mandating better signage, mandatory training for security personnel, and clear procedures to protect disabled veterans from similar incidents. Jack found himself at the center of a movement he never sought, but now carried with fierce responsibility. His voice, once quiet and isolated, became a beacon for countless others who had suffered silently. In the quiet moments that followed, standing beside his reclaimed Chevy Silverado, Jack felt something shift deep inside. The truck was no longer just a vehicle. It was a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of standing firm against injustice. Every dent and scratch told a story of survival, not just from war, but from the battles fought at home, in courtrooms, social media feeds, and the hearts of those who refused to be ignored. Jack's journey was not just about getting a truck back or securing an apology. It was about reclaiming dignity and respect for an entire generation of veterans. It was about lighting a spark that ignited hope and courage, reminding everyone that justice was not handed down freely but carved out through unwavering resolve. As he climbed into the driver's seat, the weight of the past mingled with a newfound purpose. The road ahead was uncertain, but Jack knew this victory, hard-won and deeply earned, would fuel him and others like him for whatever challenges lay beyond the horizon. His fight had become a rallying cry, a testament to the enduring spirit of those who refuse to be erased.